Hello, I'm Dr. Alison Coleman, a senior lecturer here at Royal Central School of Speech and Drama in Swiss Cottage in London. A very, very warm welcome. We have people joining us today from all over the world, and it's a very exciting event. Welcome. Within drama therapy, there are many important books, but today we are exploring the milestone achieved by Drama as Therapy, published in 1990, 2007, of 1,000 citations in sources such as books and journal articles. That's 1,000 citations. And though its author, Phil Jones, has not been involved himself in the field for nearly a quarter of a century, Drama as Therapy has consistently remained the most cited book in the field. The number 1,000 citations comes from Google Scholar. One of the ways such data is gathered. It notes both the number, which published material such as journal articles and chapters quote or cite the book. It's one key way to see the value and impact of published work. A 2014 study by Van Noorden showed that only 0.026% of research publications have over 1,000 citations. So it's quite an incredible achievement. It's drawn on a variety of ways within academic and professional circles. For example, its approach to studying the history of drama and therapy has influenced scholarship on this area. Its research and examination of practice has been influential in relation to theory and method. However, this particular seminar focuses on the influence of drama therapy's emphasis on core processes in drama therapy. I'm going to hand over to Professor Phil Jones.
Hello, my name is Phil Jones and I trained 40 years ago, and Drama as Therapy was written after a decade of practicing and in the context of supporting the training and supervision of therapists. In the book, I wanted to communicate from myself and the people I worked with to others to offer a way of seeing, explaining and creating a structure to serve and help others' work flourish, but not to dictate or edit or create a model to be followed. It aimed to communicate our experiences and to be dialogic, hence the core processes, the focus of the seminar, which are a part of the book. The research in the second edition continued this, looking at how others had worked in their connections with the core processes in their different country contexts. It continued a form of dialogue. Given that I've not been active in the field for over a quarter of a century, focusing on my current areas of concern as Professor of Children's Rights and Wellbeing, with the exception of work around the second edition and its research, I've mostly declined invitations concerning drama as therapy to focus on my current work. Perhaps a keynote or a workshop or a chapter once every year or 2 years, with the exception of the work to do with the second edition. And the question is how the book has pretty much consistently been the most cited and used in the field in the world for decades, and in a field where there are many good books often connected to particular trainings, for example, in the USA. My own perception is perhaps this is down to the life within the book and its dialogic nature. It's made more powerful as other therapists, other authors, other researchers respond, remake and create dialogue with the work we were undertaking to help create further meanings, to contextualize those, to question them, to develop them, to reform them. And this seminar will show you some of the ways from within those 1,000 citations that's occurred. I'd like to thank everyone for taking part, to you for attending and watching, and to the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, to Aya El Habab, Darshana Oswell, and particularly to Dr. Alison Coleman for all their work in making this possible. A huge thank you.
The different interviews in the seminar will communicate and develop the meanings of these processes. And rather than starting with a definition of each process, here is a sample of how others, as well as Phil Jones, have defined them based on the original material in Drama as Therapy. Did 8 interviews with researchers in a number of countries, each based on a research article or chapter which cites and is in dialogue with Drama as Therapy's core processes. Researchers was asked to provide a brief introduction to their publication connected to their citation. The interviews have all been approved by Central's Ethics Committee, and all involved have given their consent. Interviews are conducted by drama therapists, myself, Ditty Doctor, Dr. Emma Ramsden, along with Phil Jones. And we approached universities in each of the author's countries and asked if a student would like to be involved. So in each interview, we have a co-interviewer, student or students, who are recently or currently studying drama therapy, normally from the country context of the research, or studying a closely related area. The only exception, I think, is Australia, where we were unable to do this. We've added the full interviews to the repository here at Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, where you can see them later if you choose. For this seminar, we're presenting agreed extracts to give a flavour of the research articles and chapter and how they explore, problematise or develop drama as therapy's core processes as a way of celebrating, really celebrating the book's life and momentum.
So Amy and I put these slides together to give a context to the article and the research project. And this slide shows our location. We called ourselves the Biography Laboratory, and we were based in Montreal. And at the time, I was teaching at Concordia University, and Amy, Susan, and Lee were recent alumni of the drama therapy program there. So we'd meet weekly in the drama therapy studio at the university, which you see on the left. And then at the same time, I was traveling once a month to Evanston Family Therapy Center in the States, where I was part of a narrative therapy training group led by Jill Friedman and Jean Coombs. So I would take the ideas that we were exploring in the drama therapy studio to Evanston, and I would bring back what I was learning about narrative therapy to Montreal. And this created a dialogue between the two approaches. Next slide. So in back again. Yeah. In this slide, we show the ideas that we were working with. So as drama therapists, we were interested in narrative therapy and the way that narrative therapists work with people to reauthor and remember their lives. And we were particularly drawn to their idea of scaffolding. So narrative therapists use questions to scaffold therapeutic conversations so that people can move from what's known and familiar and gain a new perspective on their lives. But these are typically verbal questions. And so we wanted to find out what the body, movement, and props might add to the process. So to use your words, Phil, what would happen if the body and the mind were to engage together in discovery?
This colorful slide shows a little bit about our process that we engaged in the biography laboratory. So we worked with stories from our own lives, and we followed a process in narrative therapy called definitional ceremony. In drama therapy, we would call this witnessing. This witnessing involved a disruptive dialogue. So as we look at the slides, the colorful square on the left shows the interviewer and the storyteller engaged in conversation, while the movement reflecting team is bearing witness on the left. They're listening. They are listening and witnessing. In the second square, the movement reflecting team is given space to dialogue, to reflect on what they heard, what they saw, and what came up for them. While this is happening, the interviewer and the storyteller are bearing witness to the reflecting team. So this process between 1 and 2 went back and forth in a disrupted dialogue way until we gathered at the end. And the end was a research conversation about what we witnessed, about what we heard, and what we experienced in this disruptive dialogue experience. We often filmed this process. So thank you to Athena, who can't be with us today. And then we would rewatch the experience. We would rewatch, that video in our following time together to then bear witness to all of these processes and reflect as researchers. So this is the process that went into the article. So as Phil mentioned, the article was entitled Introducing Movement and Prop as Additional Metaphors in Narrative Therapy. The questions we were asking as we engaged in this process were, how can we combine verbal practices from narrative therapy with action methods from drama therapy? What can the body, including movement and the use of props, add and access that words alone cannot? And how can we share some of our learnings with verbal therapists who may be less familiar with the mind and the body relationship? I should note that this article was written for verbal therapists, not for drama therapists, as a means of creating a bridge and creating a dialogue between the two.
So just thinking about that and other core processes, which ones do you think, you featured the most, and how did you, work with the various core processes? Yeah, so just building on some of the examples you had already given.
Well, I think because in order to do this interview, kind of reviewed the book again, went back and reread the chapter,
Yes.
and so many were touched on in this process. It's hard to just, talk about one. Obviously, we used embodiment, definitely projection, completely about, what I'm seeing, and distancing and the safety and that exploration. And what I would like to talk about is really the listening, the witnessing is very important. It's like witnessing and being witnessed, and what Susan was just talking about before, about being seen and being heard in a way. And I would say that's what was really nice about marrying or bringing together narrative therapy practices along with what we do in the core processes. Is that disrupted dialogue is where I'm given permission to just listen and notice and witness Susan. And we had guiding as well. That's what narrative does. It's like, it's not going in with an opinion or with what to say, hey, this is what you're thinking. I'm really going in and saying, what did I notice? How does that make a difference in my life? What I've just heard, so I'm really honoring Susan's story. I'm not just, listening to her and giving her advice on what she should do next. That's not what the point is.
Yeah.
And so, so it's that witnessing that was very important, and being seen and being seen theatrically with the metaphor.
So Lee, can I ask you a little bit about that? Because one of the fascinating things for me was the way that I think you changed and worked differently with the core processes as they were originally constructed. So when I wrote originally about active witnessing, it was very much to do with enactment and someone taking on a role, being seen by others, or seeing other people play them, or looking and being looked at. But you just talked there about the relationship between witnessing, and you used the term disruptive dialogue. I find that fascinating. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Well, a disruptive dialogue is basically a chance for a person to be given permission to only listen and witness at that moment, that you're not there to have an interactive dialogue. So it's disrupted because I'm listening to you, but I'm not conversing back and forth like we are right now. It would be like, what would happen is that Christine said, okay, I am now going to interview Susan. Our job was not to interject or do anything else, it was just to witness the interview. And that's it. And then conversely, when we were doing when we were the reflecting team, we did not talk to Susan. We did not look at Susan. Like, I would look right now at Amy, and I would be having a conversation only with Amy. Hey, Amy, what did you notice? Oh, I thought this. Oh, well, I remember Amy talked about banana spiders, and I talked about balls and everything. And then we would have that and then it made me be curious about what Susan was thinking about with there. And we'd come up with our wonderings, and we'd say, this is how it's impacted my life. And so Susan gets to witness that in a way that she's not responsible for interviewing us and interacting with us. She's just hearing us. And then at the end, Christine stops us from talking and then interviews Susan again to say, well, what did you notice? What did you appreciate? What stood out for you in their conversation? And then Susan has a chance to kind of really not be worried about the responsibility of interacting with us, but she can just be allowed to hear the interview. And so that's what they mean by disrupted.
So that's fascinating for me, because it's both a lovely illustration of the value of active research and exploratory space, such as the one that you created and wrote about in your article. But earlier on, I think you used the term bridge between embodiment in drama as therapy as a core process and narrative therapy. And I think that's another really lovely illustration of how you stretched or took the concepts from drama as therapy of active witnessing, but built a bridge with narrative therapy's concepts and your own exploration. Oh, that's fascinating. Thank you.
An essential part for me was the warm-up, is that we took the time at the beginning of every laboratory meeting to reconnect, to get into our bodies, to explore movement through words that Christine would call out as we were moving in the space, and then allow our bodies to adjust and respond to what she was adding to the conversation. We had fabric available to us so that we could then use fabric. Yes, thank you. That's beautiful. It's using the fabric to enhance the bodily movements, really added another dimension to the experience. Like Amy was saying, you think you're floating, but then you feel like you're floating, or you feel like you're digging through, but then you actually are digging through.
Mm-hmm. I've got something to say about embodiment. So we were using the body and the fabric props, I'd say, like narrative resources, non-verbal narrative resources in the storytelling process. And I think, like you say in the book, Phil, that the body offers a means of communication through gesture, through sound, and through movement. But we also found that the body has its own unique knowledge. And so beyond just communicating, that it had a role in remembering and imagining and interpreting experience. So, for example, Susan, I remember when you manipulated the fabric, that's often when the insight came to you about your family. Well, just as Lee was showing us really with the two balls, when you manipulated them. Or when the movement reflecting team was responding through enactment, you got closer, you had more of an understanding of Susan's story. So that, because I did reread your chapter, Phil, and the phrase that it resonated with was you wrote that knowledge is gained primarily by and through the body in action. And I think we found that to be true very much. And then so leading on from that, because we were co-researchers rather than therapist-client, we could really mine our insider knowledge of the process. So we all brought our embodied knowledge to the research conversation and different kinds of knowledge. So Lee and Amy, it was being part of a movement reflecting team. Susan, it was being the storyteller. Me, it was being the interviewer. And we all brought that from what that experience was like. And I don't think we'd have learned what we learned without that embodied experience. So that was another aspect of the whole embodiment process that we work with. Does that make sense? Oh.
Yes, it does.
I'd like to thank you, Phil, for writing your book and and just keeping and I'm so honored that you're being honored, and this is we're acknowledging the importance of the core processes of drama therapy.
Well, thanks, Lee.
I would like to thank you both because Christine taught me so much in so many ways, and to invite me to be a part of this research and this practice has enriched my life in so many ways. And it was Christine who introduced me to Phil Jones. So I would thank you as well, because your book I've shared your book with students that I've taught. I've shared your teachings. And I love the way that in this moment they've come together, two important people in my life. So thank you both for doing this for the world.
I want to say something about your book, Phil. I think that it really creates community. So like, instead of some drama therapists have their own method, their own approach, yes, but yours is very much, what do we have in common? And even just this conversation, you're creating community. And all the time that I've known you, all of your research projects have brought people together to think together, to create together. And I just think that's the strength of the book. And that's why it has these 1,000 citations or more than. And that's why it will continue to be used, I think, going forward by all the generations that follow.
Do. So we're focusing in this interview, I guess, on the 2016 monograph, Beyond the Boundary, Is There Something Called Real Knowledge? And specifically on the section based on dancing in Nazareth. So yeah, please do, if you'd like to introduce the work, that would be great.
Okay, so the aim of all the phases of this research was to combat and challenge the idea of social alienation in the city among children, and specifically children at risk in the city of Nazareth. The whole work was an exploration of the therapeutic arts as a basis of personal and community development. In this thesis present a model of transformation. It's rooted in social development, and it's very socially sensitive, but also it's child-centered, and it was led by the children. This project is not simply an empirical investigation. It's research into feelings and desires and emotions. And especially in the third phase of the project, we created at Mawal Center the drama therapy project, where children took place in 2 drama therapy sessions through the year, each month. And at the end, they also produce a drama therapy performance. What was special about it, that it had kids from all around the city. It was very diverse, including children at risk, Muslim kids, Christian kids from all neighborhoods. It presented a model of unity and harmony and togetherness that Mawal Center always promoted and always was a model of inclusion and integration, which was very different of what we were experiencing in Nazareth, which was there's a lot of segregation and social alienation. I would like to present a scene from the drama therapy performance that was presented in 2011. In this scene is called Thoughts. It was presented by a group of girls. They developed the idea through the drama therapy process through the year, and they wrote the script themselves, and we recorded it and we added the music. This is one scene. We had 16 different scenes. The kids were the leaders. They criticized society in those scenes. They presented self, others. They presented culture. They presented desire, dreams. But I would just present this one, and I need to mention that all these showing these things are ethically approved by Mawal Center and by University of Derby. The children participated voluntarily in those activities, and their parents agreed to show these videos.
مرات بحس إني ولا إشي، مجرد نقطة، مجرد غبرة، مجرد ذرة. مرات كتير بحس إن وجودي وعدم وجودي واحد. مرات كتير بضيع، بعدش أعرف شمالي من يميني. طيب وين أنا رايحة؟ يا ترى شو المستقبل مخبيلي؟ مرات بغمض عيوني وببدأ أفكر إنه الإشي الوحيد اللي بدي إياه بهاي اللحظة إنه أرجع الزمن لهذيك اللحظة وأغيرها. مخنوقة كتير، خلص عن جد تعبت. مرات بغار كتير، بحس إنه حياة الناس اللي حوالي كتير أحلى من حياتي. حاسة إنه الكل عم يتقدم وأنا بعد موقفة محلي. حاسة حالي ضايعة بين ناس زي الألم، ما حدا بحس، ما بإيديش ولا حدا، كلهم تركوني وراحوا. الكل متضايق، الكل زعلان، فيش حدا بيسأل عن حدا، ولا حدا بيهتم. بس تصير مشكلة ولا حدا بيفهمني. ولا أهلي ولا أخوتي ولا حتى أصحابي. مرات بحس إنه خلص فيش فايدة مني. مضغوطة كتير، حاسة حالي بدي أطلع. فكي عني. بالرغم من كل الأوقات الصعبة لما بنتعب كتير وبنتضايق كتير بنلاقي إنه اللي عن جد بيحبونا بعدهم واقفين حدنا.
What sort of core processes were really important for your research, and how did you understand them? Because you talk about having to adapt and having to
Yeah.
think about the way you practiced.
And in relation to the core processes, of course, they all existed, but I focused on a transformation in particular because that one of the aims of the research was to transform the lives of children. And of course, the process of transformation is about change, about in my context, about knowing the other, who someone is, and also the combination of a very important concept from Phil's book, the dramatic identity was very strong in my research because it's all about who I am, who are they, how do we interact with each other, what kind of identity I can be and come. There was shift in identity, in witnessing the other. It was very powerful in theater and also in the drama therapy process, making life connections, of course, during the process, making life connection, changing perspective, being in a role, and separating from that role. All these things were very very much there and in the heart of the process, for sure.
And that's quite interesting that the core processes were more or less the lines through, even within quite a range of expressive methodologies.
I developed the idea of transformation in drama therapy process, and I created I can say a model or a framework, a social framework, how to create that transformation in Mawal, and it might apply to other organizations. So as I explained that Sandra, remember about that induction period. You need that induction period where a participant, when you want to do any integration, they need to know you. For my project, for example, it really helped when the participant knew me, they got used to me, my rules. So when I did the integration process, it was smooth because they already know my rules somewhere else. But it's this fine-tuning kind of phase, it's very, very important. Then explaining new boundary internalization, socializing, starting to interact in the center, prejudice and stereotyping reduction activities, creating sense of belonging. And this one also in the center, creating Mawal identity. So as I said, Mawal it doesn't focus on differences. It focuses on similarities and differences. They combine it together and create this Mawal identity to an extent where you see little kids who we are, Mawal family. It becomes a motto, it becomes a belonging. And when you create this Mawal family, this is a group, dance group that crossed other boundaries. It's the first dance group that actually presented their work in Jarash Festival. Sandra knows Jarash Festival. So in the 90s, it was a big thing. And the Palestinian Arabs in Israel couldn't go to any of those festivals because all the Arab countries were against normalization. The people, even if they had peace agreements with Israel, they were against normalization. So the Arabs were put in Israel, they put in a position where they were isolated. So I like really Malawi's, I have to read this one, Malawi's statement about the Palestinians. Palestinians, like in Israel, Palestinians are placed in a paradoxical situation, whereas Arab citizens of Jewish state, they are both inside and outside, host and guests, citizen and stateless. So as someone performing, they cannot perform to the other Arab country. It was real, but Mawal group was able to cross this boundary and to present at Jarash Festival the Palestinian story, and then presented in many different countries. So when the group perform out abroad, it also presents Nazareth. So people who were in those, in those neighborhoods at risk, that did not have that connection to Nazareth, they come to the group, they join, they become part of the Mawal family, and then they have more belonging, a sense of belonging to the city, and they present the city too. This creates harmony and transformation because of that reason, if you know what I mean. It's coming from a different place. And honestly, from what I read, as if I remember correctly, over 70% of the societies are collective. They're not individualistic. Of course, each kind of society is different and unique, right? But I believe that therapists should be more aware of that and be more culturally sensitive when working with, different people coming from different backgrounds.
And also the community aspects, the community emphasis that you
Of course.
so beautifully. So thanks very much for that, Reem.
Thank you, Reem. Thank you so much. We'll end the interview here, but is there anything you'd like to add before we say our goodbyes?
Honestly, I would like to say congratulations to Phil for this big milestone. And I still have this book, This is actually the first book I purchased ever on drama therapy. And I used it every time, I love this book.
Thank you so much to everyone involved in those presentations and edits from our interviews. Amazing. And just a reminder that all the interviews can be found in full on the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama's online repository under Drama as Therapy Research Seminar. Access is free, and we'll give you the details at the end of the seminar a bit later. So, the next two interviews concern research in Israel and Sri Lanka.
So Rina, today we're going to focus on your article from 2021, using drama therapy to enhance maternal insightfulness and reduce children's behavior problems, from Frontiers in Psychology, where it was published. So it's a great honor to have a good look at your article.
Okay, so I prepared a short introduction just to give like a context for this study. Okay, so just to say that this study is a collaborative study with other colleagues of mine, Professor Nina Koren-Kari, who helped me with this study. And the idea of this study, we call it drama therapy intervention focusing on maternal insightfulness. And I'll explain it briefly. To move the slide. Okay, so the questions that led us to this study was, how can we help children at risk and their mothers? How can we implement the knowledge from attachment research into clinical practice? And the last important one is, what drama has to do with all this? So I'll just say briefly about maternal insightfulness. So major part of my kind of research life focused on attachment theory and its related concepts. And one of the concepts I'm working with is called maternal insightfulness. It's very much resonate with other similar concepts like reflective functioning and mentalization and so on. But I'll just briefly explain what it means. So when we talk about maternal insightfulness, we're talking about the mother's or the father's ability to see things from the child's point of view, insight in the motives that underlies the child's behavior, complex view of the child, separateness, the parent's ability to see the child as a separate person from the parent with needs and wishes of her own, and acceptance of the child challenging behavior. So that's very briefly about this concept. There's a lot of writing about maternal insightfulness, but it's one of the concepts that talks about mother's or father representations regarding the child that were found to be highly connected to the child's behavior and attachment. And in this study, we decided to see how can we enhance maternal insightfulness using drama therapy. So to say that we were thinking about how to connect this concept with the practice of drama therapy. So we aim to help the parents experience the child point of view instead of just talking about it, because maternal insightfulness is talking about thinking or putting myself in the shoes of the child. I'm talking about maternal insightfulness. It can be paternal insightfulness, of course. Playing with the insightfulness position, using creative means to expand the mother's point of view of the child, using embodiment projection role to practice maternal insightfulness. So that's very briefly what was our aim. And more to say that the goals of the study was to create a protocol for intervention. Kind of we realized at the time that there are very few protocols for interventions in drama therapy, and to evaluate the efficacy of the treatment using well-standardized assessment tools. So we called it PIDT, Parental Insightfulness Drama Therapy, and the protocol was built during 5 meetings together with drama therapists working in children parent centers. So it was kind of our thoughts as researchers of attachment and drama therapy, but also with practitioners. It's a group intervention for parents. It's a short intervention of 10 weeks. It's co-facilitated by drama therapist, and it can be another therapist. And briefly to say that we were aiming to translate the component of maternal insightfulness into playful and experiential means using drama therapy. The population of the study were parents in the children parent centers belonging to the Israeli welfare centers. So these are parents that are recognized by the welfare centers as parents at risk. They had children of age 5 to 9, and the children have emotional and behavioral problems due to inadequate parental care that was recognized by welfare office. So the design of the study was 8 groups of mothers at children parent centers, 6 to 8 participants in a group, 10 weeks intervention, no other treatments while in the group, and we did all kind of standardized assessment before and after intervention that included interviews. We called it insightful assessment, also observation of the mother-child interaction, and all kind of background questionnaires, and also questionnaires about behavioral problems of the child. and follow up a year after. That's really important to say, that we had a big question whether the outcomes of the study will last even after the treatment finished. So we jump into results because it's really brief, but just to say that if someone is really interested, a long talk of mine in English can be found in YouTube. That I gave a talk at the Anna Freud Center years ago, and it was recorded about this study. So if someone wants to listen rather than reading the paper, they can see it on YouTube. Okay, so the results, so it works, yeah. So I just put in here briefly because they're very complicated results, but the 6-month follow-up assessment. So we had right after the end of the intervention, but also 6-month follow-up the intervention, which I think is really interesting. And we saw a significant positive change in maternal insightfulness classification of the mothers. So mothers that were non-insightful became insightful after the intervention. The emotional behavioral problems of the child changed significantly, as was measured on the Achenbach, the CBCL questionnaire. Before intervention, 30% of children were within the clinical range, and after treatment, no child was in the clinical range, just to say that no links between mothers and children characteristics, and more sophisticated kind of statistics that we did to ensure the significance of our results. And if people want to hear more, there are several publications on this one. So this is my brief introduction.
So maybe we should go into the drama, to the processes of the core processes. If you can say something about the drama therapy core processes that you found that were effective in this protocol.
So I think that the main thing in this concept of maternal insightfulness is that previous studies showed that the ability of the mother to think like the child's head, like to think what goes on for the child when they behave in a certain way, that they don't behave because they want to do harm or they want to behave badly. They behave because there are some drives behind it. They have a personality, they have things they like, they don't like, and so on. I think that's the core idea of maternal insightfulness. And I think that the ability to use drama, and maybe I'll start with do role play. So actually to go into the role of the child enables the mothers to really try and think in this way. As some of them told us at the end, some of the mothers said, I never thought he feels this way. But the child wasn't in therapy. It was just the imaginary played child, but still the ability to really be in this role actively and with their body, with their kind of enactment, enables them to do something different in the way they think about the child. So I think that the ability to use drama really took them a different step forward. So that's in the sense of role, taking on a role. But I think also that the involvement with their body, again, it's one thing to think about the child and to talk about the child, which is it's another thing to try and kind of embody the child, and that invites a different involvement with thinking about the child. And another thing I must say in terms of core processes or using drama, so also lots of these mothers have a very kind of difficult life circumstances. So maybe just to mention, this is not in the core process, but maybe it's part of playfulness. There's something about being able to have some joyful encounters in therapy that I think that was a major change for them, because most therapy sessions for them, they used to have this, oh, you're doing very badly. And all of a sudden there was some joyfulness. And also maybe to say something about projection. So the first meeting, we asked them to choose 3 cards. One card that represent an image for them, 1 card for the child, and 1 card for the relationship. And in this sense, we are also introducing not just the psychological concepts behind the intervention, but also the creative possibility to talk through projection. And for many of these mothers, it was a very critical kind of meeting, because a lot of them are not used to being involved in kind of thinking, kind of reverie, kind of thinking, hypothesizing or about their child. And then this active act of searching for the right image, concretely, externally, also moves something internally, kind of, what do my child looks like? What am I looking like? What characterized my relationship with the child? Through kind of looking through the cards, and maybe for some of them it was kind of initiating a new position, psychological position of thinking about, asking question about how do we look like, our relationship. So I think that the concrete action of projection, using something that is ready-made, that is very accessible for them, because even if they don't have these inner resources to kind of think metaphorically about their child, but now there is something that is already made, these images in the cards, help them to also change something in their possibility to reflect on their child. So this is the projection, I think, was the accessibility of the projection, the easiness of that, but also the curiosity in this instance of looking for the right image. I think that's a really core process that is central to our intervention.
For me, it links to what I thought was an original contribution to knowledge within the article about the core processes, because you're, in one way, I think, creating a particular kind of connection between dramatic projection and witnessing. You know, in the article, you talk very nicely. You say, you know, the way the mothers in the program are asked to create a body sculpt about their child's behavior. And you say that externalizing the inner emotional states using dramatic means, such as the core process of dramatic projection, may foster an expansion by giving a stage that emphasizes them. You say in this way, the dramatic representation itself enhances the need to reflect and to mind the other's mind, which is a fascinating set of connections for me to do with empathy and distancing, to do with the ways in which you very beautifully used dramatic means to enable emotional responses from a different perspective and insight. Is that a fair summary, or would you differ about the core processes there?
No, I agree with you, and I think that we had this. I'll just say something kind of at the end of the intervention. We had focus group of the therapist, and also we of course collected data from the participants themselves. But the therapist said that many times it's a huge struggle just to keep this kind of client group in therapy. And in this instance, it was difficult to end it because they wanted to stay. And then we kind of try to think what was different in this intervention that the mothers really were very much motivated to stay in, even though they have their own difficulties in life, and sometimes they said they don't have even money to take the bus to the center, and so on and so on. And I think that part of it was that I think playfulness. There's something that was, as I said before, also joyful. I mean, maybe that I didn't think at the time of the paper, but now I'm thinking that there was something that, playing sometimes and being creative, it's really connecting also to your inner resources. And I remember one of the groups really enjoyed even just throwing a ball at the beginning, just being playful, which for some of these mothers, it wasn't that accessible as a child as well. But going back to what you said about witnessing, so I think that specifically for this client group, the sense that they have this peer support group, but it's more than that, because when other people see my inner kind of feelings concretized dramatically, so it's stronger than I would say, I have difficulties with my child, and everybody will say, oh yeah, that's such a pity, I have difficulties with my child as well. But if I make a sculpture and it's there, and people can relate to this third kind of entity in the room, and this sense that we're really sharing something that was inside me, but now it's here and everybody can relate to it. I think that makes this witnessing of the dramatic kind of expression makes a much stronger feeling of support, and also this possibility to reflect together. Because if I'm reflecting on my inner thing, it's on my own. But if I'm putting there something and people are reflecting on what I brought, I mean, it's a shared experience. I mean, I think that in general about kind of research in drama therapy, not specifically about this paper, I think that that the question about whether it works, I think that there's quite a lot of kind of evidence showing that drama therapy works. And I think that in this time we're more focusing on what are the mechanisms of change that are working there, or to ask what makes it work. And I think the core process, as we know, it kind of gave us some language to begin thinking about that. So I think that when I'm thinking about present and future studies in drama therapy, I think much more of these kind of questions that they are incorporating core processes, looking at the mechanism of change in intervention. Regarding this specific study, I mean, there were all kinds of, I mean, my wish is that it will be implemented or even give inspiration for other people to use drama therapy together with some other psychological concepts, but to use it with wide variety of populations.
In 2007, I was hosted by Colombo, the capital of Sri Lanka, Colombo's Children's Book Society, and its largest mainstream school, to provide a research-based drama therapy group for 12 to 13-year-olds who had experienced a number of challenges in their life already: urban poverty, domestic conflict, bereavement and loss due to the tsunami and the Civil War, and who were often involuntary carers for family members that they lived with. I wondered if the children were offered opportunity to find a new language in therapeutic play and drama, would this facilitate more expression of their concerns and enable collective, collaborative working through some of those unresolved conflicts? So that was my question, that was my research question. The need for this work was identified by the school's headmaster and the teachers who offered to work as translators if needed. However, the children had a basic understanding of English and were largely self-sufficient in that respect. So I combined elements of solution-focused brief therapy with drama therapy core processes to empower children to overcome adversity and strengthen their resilience. So the chapter describes the research approach, where I set up a program of structured sessions, about 8 in total, with these children, each session an hour and a half long, over a period of a few weeks, for 9 boys and 1 girl in a group of mixed academic ability. And the chapter outlines the setup work, the needs assessment, the boundary making and the goal setting, with a planned review towards the end and an agreed sharing of some of the group work that the group wanted to share with the school staff. And the dramatic methods that this involved that led to more work with core processes included embodiment play for relaxation, projective drawing and object play, group sculpting, and group building role play, in addition to reflective discussion. In one of the activities, a child projects their needs for their world onto an object. I'm going to hold the object to camera. It's a relaxation ball. And when you squeeze it, you can squeeze the world and hold it in the palm of your hand. Mm-hmm. So this was done while other group members observed and listened to what this child was saying they wanted from the world that they lived in and needed. And the theme that came out of that, the emergent theme, was creating better environments, because Sri Lanka had had a tsunami. It was still in civil war. Mm-hmm. And these children had a lot of concerns about the safety of their environment and the effect of that on their own lives. So another example of an emergent scene from an activity was a child using a glove puppet, and that was used to, you see the glove puppet? So it wasn't entirely this one, but this was kind of the most exotic one probably that I had, but one like this. And so this was used to express feelings of alienation and then integration. We had a couple of these, so when one started being used, then someone else might put one on, and an interaction would begin. And the theme arising from the puppetry work was about conflict and reconciliation. I used core processes to help me identify the changes that were occurring, and to illustrate, and I can illustrate those with a specific child who was very expressive about the experience they were having. So in one piece of writing in the chapter, I record my observations of the changes that are taking place for this child and how they relate to the child's own creative reflections. So again, if I can give you examples, I guess what I noticed was what the child said really reflected my observations. We seem to be sharing the experience. So in, for example, the context of embodiment, dramatizing the body as one of the core processes, I observed more body awareness and confidence using voice and gesture to express feelings. And the child's experience of that, and I'm going to wear a mask to be the child's experience of that was the child saying, I can say no and put my hand out to stop somebody pushing me. Then I feel better. So in the context of play, I observed the child offering and receiving honest feedback. The child reflected, I liked your trust game. Now I trust you. In the context of playing and personification, I observed recognition and management of feelings of inadequacy and vulnerability. The child reflected, when I feel scared, I talk to my toy or draw a picture and then tell my teacher. In the context of drama therapeutic empathy and distancing, I observed capacity to empathize and meaningfully engage with peers. The child reflected, I think she is sad in the group today. We can help her play with us. In the context of transformation, I observed conflict management leading to conflict resolution. The child observed, now I say sorry and people like me again. And finally, in the context of the life drama connection, I observed cooperative play. The child reflected, it is important to play well with my friends today. They will help me tomorrow. Another place where it felt like there was a lot of creativity going on culturally was in playtime, because the children were very playful in their nature, as you would expect 12 and 13-year-olds to be. And they also were really able to really easily link up image work with enactment. Maybe I can give an example of that. So when we were looking at transformation, thinking about change and thinking about connecting the drama and the life, we used something called, what I call the life tree. Some people call it the blob tree. Maybe you've seen it before. This one, yeah. So it's a series of figures in different positions, no script attached to them. You can project your thoughts and feelings onto them in any way you like. And when I showed the group this image, they wanted to create the tree in a group sculpt. So they did. They created a giant version of the tree in the classroom, and then they because they wanted to explore when they weren't connected and what it felt like to feel isolated, maybe on the end of a branch or falling off a branch, rather than automatically a happy family. So they sculpted the tree in order for them to have a stronger sense of identity on it and to be able to communicate with each other honestly and openly about the real feelings that they were having when the play didn't go according to plan, or when there was something to disrupt their connection together. And as a result of this, one child in particular became much more vocal. And was able to use the life drama connection to make further transformations outside of the group, and that's quite relevant, isn't it, to core process, that idea about, you know, what's the agent of change, this therapeutic process, but also what happens as a result of the change taking place, and where do we see it demonstrated later?
It's very interesting because each has its own like branches.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's the tree. It feels like it hugs all the core processes at the same time, and then when the client or whoever the population is, when they're experiencing it, you see it like as a sustained, even like process. It's not really just being there and just it's done there. No, it's very sustained, and it reminds me actually of trees. Trees go through all the seasons, but they're still there no matter what. So it feels like that. Even in art therapy, we always do this technique where draw yourself. If you were a tree, how would you look like? So drawing the tree from scratch, it's very interesting how every person sees themselves, what kind of season they are, how many branches this tree host other people or not. So it's very interesting seeing this kind of like another variation of the tree here in the core process. Yeah,
absolutely.
Very
And I
beautiful.
was thinking, yeah, that's a lovely metaphor, and I guess it's about personal growth, isn't it, and about connection with other people. And just going back to Emma, there was something you said that made me think about the use and the evolution of the blob tree, which is its original name, isn't it? In a way, I guess that for me parallels the evolution of core processes. That idea about people sharing in a basic concept and then taking it and practically applying it and adapting it, you know, over the years in different environments, and how it has. In my chapter, I use the term core processes at the heart of drama therapy. And I was struck when I read that over and thought that's quite a statement to claim the core processes at the heart. And I do believe that's where they are, because Phil has written with such integrity and clarity. I believe he's given a basis for core processes which make them absolutely root and branch of drama therapy.
Absolutely. Jane, thank you so much for offering that metaphor, bringing the core processes onto the tree and the soup bag of resources as well, because I really agree, Genevieve, there's something so brilliant about thinking about the heart of drama therapy and the opportunity to celebrate Phil within the heart of drama therapy as well.
Absolutely.
You know, and also the wonderful way that the legacy aspect of this interview, you know, absolutely delightful.
I think I just feel full of appreciation to have had the privilege really of working with them, and that goes for pretty much every group I've worked with over the years, and I bring that appreciation into every therapeutic encounter, and I think that's a really important positioning to take, and there's something about the core processes of drama therapy that excite me still after all this time, and And it's certainly delightful to have had opportunity to talk about it as well, because often we're so busy doing the work, sometimes it is hard to sit back and reflect on what the value of it is and what the learning of it is. So it's been delightful to be able to do that, and I feel really hopeful thinking about drama therapists, you know, new drama therapists coming into the field, that they will continue to make use of and adapt the core processes. In that sense, I think they're timeless because they're so adaptable and so versatile. And that gives me hope for drama therapy in the future.
Thank you so much for those interviews and the fascinating work they analyse. So, the next two interviews concern art therapy in Canada. Then we're moving to Cameroon to find out more about therapeutic theatre.
Hello, I'm Madeline Montgomery. I'm a member of the Métis Nation of Alberta, originally from Treaty 7 territory, and I've just graduated from the drama therapy program at Concordia University in Montreal. And today I'm joining you from the unceded traditional territories of the Semiahmoo First Nation and the broader territory of the Coast Salish peoples. So thank you very much. Welcome to Lucy and Felice, and to our focus on Journey Women, art therapy in a decolonizing framework of practice.
Together to paint, we put our big maps out on canvas, paired up and drew each other's outline, the high quality depths of the images we created, sharing our story, which includes some painful parts, expression through art.
I didn't even know myself that day. To be open, to be okay with being creative. I can't deny that part of myself, self-conscious, unconscious, worried about aesthetics, this problem with me wondering what other people think. I was getting it out of myself, being able to release something on campus. Some of it's been inside so long. It needed to get out. It needed to be told, bad and good, it needed to be felt. I've spent my life not saying yes. Yes, I'm creative. Yes, I'm good at this or that.
These poems were created through a practice called found poetry, where excerpts from interviews with Indigenous artists were used to create poems about their experiences with a project called Journey Women. Here we honor these strong women and their stories. Here we give thanks to the women, our ancestors, and the forces that brought us together, the land, the animals, and the spirits that help us heal and keep us strong.
Journey Women was a project that involved a 3-day art space workshop with Indigenous women that eventually turned into several art exhibits and community initiatives. The women involved were First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and Aztec Mayan. The article we are here to talk about today focused on the first art exhibit of the large-scale body map images depicting the healing experiences of 8 Indigenous women. The collaborative research project was between Minwashin Lodge, Indigenous Women's Support Center in unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin Territory, colonial known as Ottawa, Canada, and Concordia University on unceded Ganagahage land in Jujage, colonial known as Montreal. It aimed to gain an understanding of the conditions that contribute or challenge Indigenous women in their process of healing from the impacts of violence and colonization.
In the paper, we described the process of creating body maps, which integrated an art therapy framework with traditional Indigenous ceremonies of prayer, smudging, drumming, and singing, as well as movement and grounding activities, poetry, and art creation. We also discuss how a public exhibit of body maps acted as a powerful medium of empowerment, a forum for women to be witnessed by the community, and a means for Indigenous women to act as their own agents of social change and social justice.
Our conversation today will be centered around how we understand the processes of witnessing and how its concept has evolved for us since we started the project 15 years ago. This quote from one of the artists captures the significance and power of witnessing and its ongoing impact. The fact that my map was and will continue to be witnessed and shared by others broke for me the spell that my silenced abuse held with me. The more people that see the journey I took, then the more people it means traveled it with me. Hence, I am no longer alone. I thank you deeply for honoring me and my past and future with your sight. Linda Bapai-Andekwe.
For me, it was fascinating to read how you'd taken the concepts that I'd originally come up with and contextualized those in remarkable ways that I think give further insights into active witnessing within the context of arts therapy. So, for example, when I initially developed the definition of active witnessing, it was based on some of my own thematic analysis of clinical work, of case study. And what I had in mind was very much the idea that within drama, part of what can happen is that someone might move from witnessing someone's experiences to taking part in that, or vice versa. Within a role play, you might play yourself, but then move out of that and see someone else role playing you. So there's a witnessing function. So that's very much to do with empathy and distancing within the. I think another way is that we often in drama therapy might use objects to depict someone's life or their world. And that, again, is a way of them witnessing themselves. But I was very taken by the way in which some of the changes or the ways that you developed that was absolutely to do with the use of body maps in relationship to active witnessing, but also to do with context of the women within your work, the way in which your relationship with them and witnessing changes and develops. So I was fascinated about the way in which you use place, for example, in that the images that you created and the witnessing opportunities involved not just the group, but people outside the group. And you took that into places that had particular social, cultural, emotional, psychological meaning. So I wonder if you'd like to say a little bit about the ways that you maybe shifted active witnessing away from just being within the group to the spaces and relationship outside the group and the role of art within that.
Yeah, it's interesting. The concept that I understand now, I didn't know the term then, but as you're talking about it in terms of how we evolved it, like the object was different. It was self-created. It was a artist made object, and they were relating to it. And the common term that comes up in Indigenous studies is relationality, which is our deep connection. It's not with people, place, and human and non-human forms. And so when I think about how this has evolved and how I understand it 15 years later, because now I have this concept of relationality, I think what happened was the women created a relationship with themselves and their art, that their art became an object, but also it had its own spirit. Like when they put their self in that, that's why it took a life of its own. And I think as we layered the witnessing, all the women connected with each other and they created a relationship with each other. And then when the artists showed their work and shared their story with the community, they became witnesses themselves, but not only just witnesses, but they became in relation to each other. Now you've heard my story, and now you have the responsibility of hearing it and knowing what to do with it. And that is what relationality I'm understanding is when I have a relationship with someone, a community, a land, I take responsibility for maintaining that relationship. And I think this is what Indigenous people talk about being treaty relatives is I, as a settler, was born here without knowledge of my relationship to treaty and to my responsibility to Indigenous peoples to uphold that treaty relationship. And so I think this is kind of that healing process of creating relationships and relationality. And so also the piece about creating relationships and relationalities, we have to acknowledge the hurt that's happened that has disrupted our relations and that has disrupted our upholding of those treaty relationships. And so I think the women themselves are so brave to share their stories so that the silence of their traumas was broken and that this witnessing was holding that. And the counter narrative that they created was that they're not victims, that they are strong and they have healed as much as they can and they're still healing, and that they can share, and they don't need to be silenced.
Just a very brief quote that really took me in your introduction was, I think it was one of the women who participated in this project said, the spell that my silenced abuse held me with, that was broken. And I love this aspect of, like, it wasn't just personal healing, it was collective healing, it was community healing. And I think that that's what active witnessing does so uniquely, that not all, you say this wasn't therapy maybe, but not all therapy does this. It doesn't bridge that gap between the personal and the public. And I am curious about how you framed this exhibition, like who was invited, were there protocols, was there ceremony? I wonder if you could speak to that just briefly, maybe.
Yeah. It was all put together by spirit, because we were like, okay, we got this funding to do the gallery exhibit. And so, initially it was just going to be something quite small, but then, I found a gallery that would exhibit it. And then I was telling the team, like my whole staff, like, okay, we're going to have this exhibit. And my director was like, oh, this sounds big, Lucy. Let's get Grandma Irene. And Grandma Irene is our resident elder. She's like, okay, yeah, we'll do that. And then, like, it all pieced together. I was like, okay, we'll get the food. And then it started becoming this whole thing. And so we didn't realize how big it was until we realized how big it was. And then and so then it started off in ceremony. So Grandma Irene, like, opened up with prayer and shared her. She's also like an elder in our community, and she was a residential school survivor and very accustomed to sharing her story. So, we opened up with that, with her holding that space with us, and the women who drummed were also, used to being community and sharing their prayer through song. And that's how, and then the people who were invited were guests of, like, the artists and any community members who've attended Minwashin and know Minwashin. So it was a really supportive group of people. And then the exhibit was opened for the public to see throughout the whole time that it was open. So it was like a really gentle landing for all the artists, and then it got wider and there was media there as well. So from what I recall, Felice, if you remember anything else.
Yeah, I do remember it being this seedling of an idea that just grew quite quickly. But yeah, to me, it was when we first started the project, remember the executive director of Minwashin was like, okay, don't really know what you're doing, but okay. And Lucy and I were like, we don't really know what we're doing yet either, but then the other thing I think that really stood out was the when Minwashin, like, they closed the doors at Minwashin but moved everything over to the exhibit. So all the employees and the clients were, like, moved into the art gallery. And it was nice because the space was created, like, Minwashin is supporting this. And so yeah, it was a nice landing, I guess, for the artists, for the women who felt maybe a little hesitant, or it is nerve-wracking. I'm gonna do an artist talk. The CBC, which is the National News Corporation of Canada, is gonna be there, and local a radio station too, right? There was
They had done interviews, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it was really nice for the support there of Minwashin, and then of Ottawa, who the people who came. And yes, there was, yeah, as Lucy mentioned, there was ceremony there as well. We started off, you know, in a good way. It was quick, but I think intentional too, with what was done. Yeah.
What a beautiful way of like widening the circle. You say like this, the circle comes back over and over again, and kind of gently and responsibly widening. And it sounds like it happened very organically.
So now over to Professor Paul Annenbaum, who, before we begin to interview him about the relationship between his research and drama as therapy, will offer us a brief introduction to some aspects of the article. So welcome, Paul, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Phil. And I must say that it's an immense pleasure for me to be interviewed by Phil Jones, a renowned author whose work I knew since about, I think, 2009 when I came across his publications, and they inspired me a lot. And the work that he did pushed me and encouraged me to be able to carry out research on the use of drama as far as therapeutic interventions is concerned in Cameroon. I must say from the very beginning that it is thanks to the publication, this particular publication that Phil Jones published in 1996, which is Drama as Therapy, that I began to question myself and ask myself so many questions as far as Cameroon is concerned, because before then, I had been studying drama right from the undergraduate level at the University of Yaoundé 1 in Cameroon, but I had not come across the notion of drama therapy. So my study in drama was just basically like using drama for entertainment purposes, or studying drama as a form of entertainment. And when I come across the notion of drama as therapy, and this was in Drama as Therapy, published by Phil Jones in 1996, I first of all came across this book, like I said, in 2009, and I started reading just excerpts of these books on the internet, and they inspired me a lot, and this pushed me to investigate further on how we can be able to use or to appropriate notions of drama as therapy as developed by Phil Jones and use them within the Cameroonian context, knowing fully well that in Cameroon, and as of then also, we do not have a well contextualized methodology to use drama within the mental health settings in Cameroon. So this was actually my driving force, and I decided in 2012 to carry out an experimental study or an experimental practice on using drama as a form of therapy. And this was done within a psychiatric unit in one of the Cameroon's most famous psychiatric hospitals, which is called Jamoh Hospital. And that is where I experimented amongst other methods, Phil Jones's methods of using drama within the therapeutic context. And I explored, most importantly, the notions of embodiment and improvisation, which are concepts and notions which Phil Jones has developed and which I found in them aspects that can be appropriated into the Cameroonian context and use. So when I used this in that particular project in 2012, I found that they were quite therapeutic and that they were adaptable to the Cameroonian context. So that was my motivation factor. And that's what I can say as far as a brief introduction to that particular study is concerned.
Considering that conventional theater anthropologically is not a thing embedded in Cameroon, in Cameroonian tribal and cultural practices. wherein this culture's practice, what can be called natural or unscripted performance, such as libation, ceremonial rites. How much ease do you think this will be for a typical Cameroonian to embrace not only the interaction of a conventional theater you are introducing, but also benefit from the therapeutic potentials of it?
Yes, Dawisu, that's a fantastic question. And I know definitely that a typical, should I call it traditionalist, will say that, yes, drama therapy per se is not found in Cameroon, or better still, therapeutic theater per se is not found in Cameroon. And this kind of viewpoint might be expressed by someone who is viewing ritual performance, viewing a rite of passage, or better still, viewing even initiation rites, not as performances. But if you look at what Aristotle defined as theater, or what he used as characteristics of what can be called a theater performance, you will notice that Aristotle basically highlighted 5 elements. And these 5 elements will include a performer, you will include a message, you will include a place, you include time, and of course, you include an audience. 5 elements which are primordial for us to talk about a performance. And if you go back to a ritual, you will notice that in a ritual, all of these 5 elements are represented. And if these 5 elements are represented, then I have every reason to call a ritual a performance. And if I call a ritual a performance, in this ritual, I wouldn't say that the ritual is drama therapy. I wouldn't say the ritual is therapeutic theater, but rather I would say that in the ritual, I have therapeutic elements. In the ritual, I have therapeutic aspects that interact. Let me take, for example, the main celebrant of a ritual. The main celebrant is compared now to the actor in theater. He will always have a form of a setting that is secular in nature. And this secular setting requires that the main celebrant is found in the middle, and all the other participants form a circle around the main celebrant. When these participants form this circle around the main celebrant, there is a bond that is created between the main celebrant and the other participants. And these participants are considered as the audience members in this particular celebration. When the bond is broken, if the circle is broken, the effect or the outcome of that ritual would not be obtained. If the bond is maintained, the circle is maintained, the outcome will be obtained. This outcome is what I call the therapeutic effect. This therapeutic effect is only obtained if the participants who understand the reason why they have to maintain this circle, and the main celebrant who is found in the middle understand why he has to stay in the middle and not come and form part of the circle. This convention, the understanding that there is a main celebrant in the middle and the other participants, like the audience members, in the circle, is the convention which Jones describes as a convention between the participants and the audience, understanding their place, that they are actually participating in the drama or the theater making process that is not a form of using just some aspects of theater, for therapeutic outcomes, but involving themselves in the theater making process that in itself is therapeutic. So when I come to analyze such a performance, I will not view it like, okay, just the acting alone was therapeutic. No. Or I'll come and say, no, just the act of observing as an audience member was therapeutic or was cathartic. No, but rather the entire process, everything that contributes to that performance is therapeutic. And therefore, the theater itself is therapeutic. This is not to say that the ritual is therapeutic. No, but there are therapeutic outcomes obtained from the ritual ceremony. If this is obtained, and if we are okay with the fact that we contribute or we participate in a ritual and we have therapeutic outcomes, then I will not be wrong if I appropriate Western notions that describe and qualify what is therapeutic in a performance, and I study or I analyze what is done in a ritual to say this is therapeutic, or to say this is a form of therapeutic theater. Which means when I combine Western theorization, or I will not generalize it by saying Western theorization, if I combine Jones's theorization of using drama within therapeutic context, I can conveniently apply it within the Cameroonian setting, apply it out of the hospital setting within a community setting, and state that the notions of acting, notions of embodiment, notions of improvisation are all used in our own local performances in order to obtain therapeutic outcomes.
Well, thank you for that beautiful answer, Prof. You actually widened my horizon.
Thank you so much for those interviews. I hope you enjoyed them. Amazing, amazing work. But we're moving on to our final two interviews now. The first one relates to work in Australia. And then secondly, we'll be hearing from a group of researchers in North America. After those interviews, you'll have an opportunity to share any reflections or ask any questions of Professor Phil Jones. It's my great pleasure to welcome Joanna Janist, who has been a drama therapist for a long time. We've met many times at conferences, and we're meeting today to talk about her work with elders and people with dementia and the core processes. Professor Phil Jones was celebrating 1,000 citations of his work on the core processes, mostly in this book, Drama Therapy, 1996. And today we're going to be focusing on Joanna's book, Drama Therapy with Elders and People with Dementia, published in 2023. Joanna, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's such a privilege to be here. I'm so delighted. I'm a drama therapist who lives in Australia. I was trained at Hertfordshire in the UK, and I'm an adjunct fellow of Western Sydney University. And I suppose I've been working with drama therapy now for about 30 years, mostly in mental health and dementia.
Thank you, Joanna. And you're going to tell us, you're going to introduce us to your work and something of your work with the core processes and Phil's work. You've known Phil for a long, long time. So I'm going to hand over to you.
I certainly have. Thank you so much. So this is a really great occasion. This screen shows you perhaps how in Australia it's been wonderful to bring people out to and have people to invite themselves out to our country, because drama therapy has been very small there. So you can see actually Alison down here. We were starting the World Alliance of Drama Therapy at a conference. You can see David Powley, Sue Jennings, David Johnson, and Circa Marino, and different people who I've worked with. But here, if I change this slide, we'll have a look at the person who this is in honor of, which is Phil. We'll have a look at this photo. I chose this photo of Phil because it is typical of Phil in the way that he has always helped students and other younger drama therapists to go forward. You can see that he's pushing Jonathan forward in the picture and giving Rain lots of space, and he's just standing there behind. And Phil actually failed me in my first essay, and I didn't take that personally, but I just really wanted to know more about this man who had such clarity, which I didn't possess myself, and was able to talk about drama therapy in a very exciting way. I fell into dementia almost, and this became a great love back in 2008 when I was directing a play with some students for a conference with 200 nurses, and before they showed how each of the arts therapies could help dementia, I was asked to make a speech instead of the professor of gerontology. So at that stage, I hadn't worked with dementia, so I had to quickly find some work with dementia, because after that, I was being offered to write a chapter in a book, having never worked with people with dementia. So that's what happened. So that's a slide which I love, because it's not just using embodiment, but it's having the courage to run under the circle, which is different from what everybody else is doing. And I think these people have such courage and disinhibition, which is a dirty word in mental health, but which helps them to play. So I've put in a slide about the projection, the things that you would all be familiar with to work with projection, and how important it has been for people in a particular stage of dementia. I'll show you on the next slide. Need projection perhaps more than role play and embodiment. So you'd also be familiar with this paradigm of Sue Jennings. We all work with this these developmental ideas, and it's a fantastic tool to know that the baby comes and brings embodiment into the world and feels the world through fingers, toes, and facial expressions, and then projects through their toys. And this magic time when they actually can say I, then they know the difference between me and not me. So I reversed this paradigm and worked out that for people with dementia, it was really important to know that they had mild dementia if they're going to take on a role. because with mild dementia, most people know the difference between me and not me. And projection is very helpful with moderate dementia. And what happens last of all, when words slip away, is that the body speaks louder than the voice or the words. And we need absolutely to observe those movements. I just popped this in because I think it's just a wonderful thing to know that when we're working with people with dementia, we need to be aware of their appreciation of beauty. And when we go around to aged care homes, we don't actually always see things that are really beautiful, but that can be part of people's environment, which really helps them as well. So that's a little list of references, and thank you very much for listening to that. Alison has very kindly already shown my book, but I'll be referring to that more as we go along.
I'm so inspired by your story, but I'm thinking about, we went through pandemic in the last couple of years. So I'm just wondering, after pandemic, how do we do the embodiment, the chosen core process that you chose to work has developed or changed? And how do they acquire the different significance in the context of your work?
Thank you for the great question, Shanapan. I think, working with supervisees and supervisees of supervisees, as I do, it's really important for them to use their body on screen. And I wrote an article about this for the Drama Therapy Review. So on screen, really, they need to embody their feelings, be curious about what's going on in their body at the beginning and the end, and that's important. And so, and there are other core processes that changed for me too, that I would have, I'm sure people here would be the same. So I would have objects. I don't know if you can see that.
Yes, we can. I can see a frog. Is that a rhinoceros?
So I had a particular supervisor. I mean, sometimes people have these in their house when you're working with them, but it's great to have them so that they can tell you which ones to come forward to be their supervising, the person they're supervising, and another one to be the client, so that they can work out something that's going on in that person's supervision. And I think with some people who have done some psychodrama or drama therapy, they can role reverse with those objects. And Phil makes a point of saying, that the action is important, the action that develops from using the objects. So that changed for me. What really changed for me too was using his transformation core process. I have had, for 6 years, I've had this woman who is very creative, very poor. She can only work with a phone with me. She doesn't have the money to spend on the data, but she takes object or everyday objects in her house, and she can use her broom to be, she's got long COVID, poor love, and she can use her broom to be the part of her that says, I can't go on, life isn't worth living. And then she can use another, like her walking stick, she can use to say, I am powerful, I am going somewhere. And she can have a conversation between those two. She can she can't write poetry, but she can speak poetry, so I can type it at the other end on the computer and then send that to her, and she can speak her poetry. She can do drawings and send them to me. I can listen while she uses the art materials, which make that quite intimate. And Phil says in his book that there are certain relationships between the therapist and the client which are transformational. And I think that one, I'll call her Pamela, I think that one with Pamela is a transformational relationship. I've learned so much from working with her.
Yes.
I'm going to get us started. I'm going to be talking about understanding school-based drama therapy through the core processes and analysis of intervention vignettes, which is a paper that I published with Dr. Christine Mayer, who's an assistant professor of social work at the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg. Dr. Mayer and I set out in 2018 to serve as guest co-editors of Drama Therapy Review. There was a special issue focused on school-based drama therapy. And we crafted a survey that was really meant to gain demographic information around the landscape of school-based drama therapy practice. It was a practice and prevalence survey. So we asked questions around what kinds of drama therapy were being practiced in the schools across the United States and Canada, descriptive information in terms of drama therapist additional training, whether they were full-time or part-time, all of those aspects, again, to gain a comprehensive picture or a snapshot of what was happening in the schools. Out of that data set, we actually collected a series of questions as well to build off of that descriptive information that were more vignette oriented to holistically understand what people were doing as well. So we asked individuals as part of the survey to describe a vignette from their work. So when we went to analyze the data, we found we had a huge corpus of information. We ended up publishing 3 papers out of that data set. The first one was the lead for the special issue for DTR, which was in 2019. Again, that was the practice and prevalence survey. That was just the landscape. The second one was really looking at implementation strategies of school-based drama therapists in the schools. And the third one is the article that we're talking about in this interview, which is looking at school-based drama therapy practice and really analyzing those vignettes. Our intention was to try and get a better holistic understanding of practice. And we went about asking ourselves, how are we going to analyze this? What's the tool that we're going to use to be able to better understand what drama therapists are doing in the schools? And how can we understand that through a drama therapy lens? So one of the things that Dr. Jones did in his core processes work was he asked drama therapists to look at their own clinical work and utilize the core processes as an analytic tool. And so we wanted to adopt that practice in a schools-based context, in a North American context, and see if we can highlight some of the core processes that were being investigated, that were being utilized, I should say, in a school-based clinical practice. So that's what the form of the paper is. We look at both school-based drama therapy practice and try to identify practice trends, but also bring in a core processes lens to better understand what's happening within vignettes that were taken from school-based practice. And from that research, we came to some determinations about the core processes themselves as a research analytic tool and made some recommendations as well in terms of moving forward, which I will offer in a moment as we progress through the interview. But that's the gist of the article and what the focus is.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Delphi study. And before I get into that, I'll talk a little bit about the history of what led to us going through that process. And it started with a 2019 study that was written by Dr. Callie Renee Armstrong, Dr. Jason Friedman, and myself. It is a snapshot of empirical drama therapy research conducting a general review of the literature, which was published in the GMS Journal of Arts Therapies. And the recommendation from that review of the empirical research was that many said a focus on the core processes and operationalization and measurement could be a way of sort of centering and focusing in and getting more from the empirical research. So I think that's where the sort of heart of the Delphi study began. And that led to, let me just hop over to this, sorry. The team getting together, and the team for the Delphi study was Jason Friedman and Callie Armstrong, Angel Cook, myself, Shaila Rowe, and Chelsea Kern. And then essentially that study goal was to really look at the project goal was to determine what core processes are occurring within a drama therapy session, to establish cohesion within the practice and to move towards operationalization of communal practice. And then the third was to develop a unifying language to describe and further articulate drama therapy.
Fabulous. Thank you for that very rich background, all of you. If we're ready to move on to our main topic of conversation, we can go ahead and hear about how you went about investigating the core processes in this work.
Absolutely. Thank you. So as Jason and Shaila kind of filled you in, there was a research trajectory pushing toward or guiding toward this idea of operationalizing the core processes. So what we saw, as was mentioned, is first of all, the value of the core processes, that they had this universalism to them in which in drama therapy, right, we have multiple approaches. So we have DBT and role theory, and that the core processes transcend those different approaches, so that we see embodiment in DBT, we see embodiment in role theory, we see embodiment in therapeutic theater. So this idea of how do we recognize the core processes in multiple approaches and then work toward measurement. So because of that, we saw the value not only in research, as Jason was saying, but how that could lead then to clinical application later once we understand the foundation, going from the theoretical to the empirical of the core processes. So in the 25 years, right, plus of Dr. Jones's work of building the core processes, there was a lot of variability, as Shaila talked about, in how things showed up. So under the guidance of Jason, he was the research chair at the time, he chose the Delphi study as the structure, which is a communal study. So what that means is we on the research team, we were organizing the research and following the methodology, but it was really expert consensus from drama therapists in the field, North America specifically, that we were seeking information from. So we helped guide the research, but it was really the evaluators are both principal evaluators and our additional evaluators, which I'll talk about in a moment, who formed the new definition. So within the Delphi study, we had 4 rounds. So our first round and our second round were with our 5 original panelists. So these original panelists were folks in the field who had a research background, who had a clinical background, who were had a research and teaching background and were really embedded in the work of drama therapy, not only within as a researcher and publishing, but also as practicing and teaching drama therapy. So they were considered experts in the field. And what we did was we brought to them the variability of the core processes, and we said, okay, let's work with this, let's look at this, and you tell us which you think should be operationalized or are able to be operationalized, because as we keep going back to even now as we're working through this is the observation part. So one of the things that happened within the Delphi study is that empathy was taken out of the core processes. And that doesn't mean that empathy isn't important to drama therapy. Empathy is hugely important to drama therapy, as we know, but it's not a core process that is specific to what is happening in a drama therapy session, right? It's happening across the board, and it's not necessarily observable in the way that we are observing the core processes. So within the first two rounds, we presented the panelists with this tripartite structure that Shaila is going to talk more about later, but it's what it is, what it does, and what is observed. So the what is observed piece is really important because we wanted to make sure that this study would be able to lead toward future studies of operationalization. So the team of panelists came up with 7 core processes that they put forth into round 3. And in round 3, we went more into the community. So we brought in 25 additional evaluators, and we did a quantitative and qualitative approach where we put out a Likert survey of each core process and their definition, their tripartite definition. And then we had the additional evaluators rate their agreement. How much did they agree on I think a 1 through 7 of if this definition made sense to them, if it was applicable, if it was something that was observable, if it also was in line with how they were understanding the core processes in their own practice. And we also allowed them to give some qualitative feedback. So we wanted to make sure that there was inter-rater reliability and rater agreement between everybody. And we wanted to give opportunity for folks to also add, because as we know in the 25 years, right, there's so much nuance. There's so much we're discovering as the theory is becoming. And in our additional evaluators, one of the things that was really important was having as much diversity as possible so that we had lots of different points of view and understanding from folks in North America and how they were practicing. So in round 3, we were, so in inter-rater reliability, 80% threshold is good. And we were able to have between an 88 and 96% agreement, depending on the core process. So some core process, there was 88%, some there's 92, 94, and 96, but there was a minimum of 88% agreement. So what we did then as a team was we coded the qualitative data so that we could take that back to our original panelists. And we also saw that the quantitative reliability bared out and that there was agreement within the community in terms of that these core processes represented their understanding of how they viewed them. So we took that information back to our panelists, our original panelists in round 4, and they integrated the feedback as made sense for them, and they created again the 7 core processes, so that stayed throughout. Within the 7, so there are 6 that are from Jones, and even though their variability, so active witnessing, distancing, dramatic play. So Jones named it as play. We the panelists brought in dramatic, and then the additional evaluators included that, and that was in part to separate the play we do from the play that play therapists do, or any other type of field. Dramatic projection, embodiment. So those were the 5 that didn't change title so much, except for dramatic play. And then multidimensional relationship. So that was transformed from the triangular relationship. And the multidimensional relationship is looking at the dramatic reality, the participant and the therapist all together, and the relationship that is built between those in dramatic reality. And then there was a brand new core process that was introduced called engagement in dramatic reality. And this was something that has now come, as we're working toward it, really, really important and central to how we're understanding it. And as I said, even in multidimensional relationship, dramatic reality is one of the core pieces. I'm using the word core for core, but one of the main pieces, right? One of the 3 pieces of building this relationship. So dramatic reality was brought to the forefront and integrated into this core processes theory. So in the end, we had 7 core processes that we ended the Delphi study with, that we have been working with over the last several years. And one of the ways that we really see that we can grow is through research. And we really believe, I think, as a team, that the core processes are a really invaluable point of moving us forward and moving us toward that.
Great, thank you so much. I don't know if there's anything anybody wants to add.
I'd like to add just a little and say,
yeah,
I've been a drama therapist since 2002, registered with the NADTA since 2004, and it was around that time that Penny Lewis published the first current approaches in drama therapy, along with David Reed Johnson. And so that introduction of a presentation of drama therapy from that perspective, I found really interesting. But there was a part of me, even as a new drama therapist, that thought there's a through line between all of these approaches. And it seemed interesting to me that there was like, like a setup where you use this approach or you use this approach. And to me, I was thinking, no, there's something in my experience of being in the theater. There's this theme that sort of goes through each of these that connects them. And that's exactly what Phil Jones gave us in the core processes conceptualization. It provided that theory that unified all of those. And I think that is, it's an incredible gift to our profession to be able to have that unifying, connecting concept of what it is that holds it all together. So that's just my 2 cents in how it's been valuable for me.
And I'll just say one last thing, which is none of this would be possible without Dr. Jones's brilliant conceptual work and research around the core processes to fortify them and clarify them. So we have been talking a lot about language during this interview, and that language has given the structure to a profession and given us the dialogue to be able to have a dialectic around these constructs and concepts. So we would not be in this space, obviously. I know this is honoring the work, but we would not be where we are in terms of our research and thinking or just the trajectory of the profession without Dr. Jones's foundational and fundamental work. So we are in gratitude for his thinking and his publication and efforts in this regard, and we'll continue to be thankful and continue to be adding to the 1,000 citations in terms of moving forward in our research. So this is a thank you for creating that platform.